What are your influences? No, just a joke. I never asked that question.
All right.
You can introduce yourself to the camera, say who you are, what you do, what you don't do.
Hi, this is Aaron Stainthorpe, the vocalist for My Dying Bride. That's what I do.
All right. Forgive me if this seems like a joke question, but it's not often that one gets to interview the Lord of My Dying Bride. So I want to take advantage of this time and ask you some questions that have been on my mind. And maybe I've asked some of these questions before in an interview for the Grimoire, but I'd like to see if your answer has changed over time.
I'm sure they will have done.
All right, so what is your sexual preference? No, I'm just kidding. My Dying Bride in the early days had very demon god-like vocals.
Mm-hmm.
And with Turn Loose the Swans, the vocals completely discarded the demonic aspect, and they were clean. Before I get into Turn Loose the Swans, how did the band react to your singing clean? I heard that you didn't prepare the band, you just decided to sing cleanly into the microphone, and I think Calvin fell down laughing. Could you tell?
Well, that's a bit rich. I think falling down laughing is not quite right. He may have raised a couple of eyebrows, because of course I don't consider myself as a singer, but a vocalist. For me, a singer hits all the right notes and works well with any musicians, and they work in harmony, musician and singer. I'm a vocalist, and I think a vocalist needs to work actually even in more harmony with the music that's going on, because you can't hit the notes, so you have to do something else to make the words really gel with the music. And I consider people like Bob Dylan and Mick Jagger as poor singers, but amazing vocalists. We all know that when you hear Mick Jagger sing, it's not the most amazing vocal performance in the world, but because of who he is and the way he delivers his words, he's just solid gold. And so I thought to myself back in the day, death metal vocals are great, absolutely love it, still doing it today, 24 years later. But it's nice to vary the things that you can do. I'm sure guitarists try and do, different sorts of guitar playing, and I needed to vary my vocals. There's no point doing the same thing over and over again. Not only will the audience get bored, but I will get very bored. So I thought, I've written some interesting lyrics, and I want people to hear them. The death metal style often crushes the emphasis and the passion in certain words, and certainly they're less audible. They're louder, but they're less audible. So I thought, well, if I've written some good lyrics, I want people to hear them, so I'm going to sing them in a clean voice. Let's see how it goes. And yeah, of course, the rest of the band weren't expecting it. Of course, I was nervous to hell to do it. And it was a bit ropey in the early days, as I'm sure everyone who does something new for the first time is. But I persisted and worked with the rest of the guys, and it turned out all right. So now we sort of went through a period where it was 50-50 death metal vocals, clean vocals. On these latter few albums, it's been mostly clear vocals with a few death metal vocals thrown in. And I'm sure we'll get onto the new album shortly, but the new album is more 80% death metal vocals and 20% clear vocals. So it's coming back, but it never really went away. I just like to try other things, as I'm sure all musicians do.
I just find it interesting that you didn't warn the band at all. You just went in and did what you wanted to do.
It's because if you sometimes let them know, they might get in before you even had the chance, saying, no, it's not our thing, it's not what we do. So I thought, just do it on the day and see what happens. Of course, they're all playing away, and then there's a sudden pause, and they're thinking, right, okay, is this going to work, or is this going to fail miserably? And they went for it. As I say, there was a few raised eyebrows, but ultimately, I'm glad I did it, and I think it's worked.
After that set,
Carry on.
What was the discussion about the clean vocals? Was there resistance to it? Did Calvin quit?
No, he didn't quit. Well, he quit eventually, but that was several albums later. Now I think they quite like the fact that I'm adding something else to the music, because we always like to layer things. We had lots of keyboards, violins, guitars doing harmonies all over the place. So we always had lots and lots of layers going on in the music, and by adding clear vocals as well as death metal vocals, it added yet another layer. And again, it was a bit, I'm so out of shape. It took a while for them to get used to it, but they went with it, and it's paid off.
Did you think that Turn Loose the Swans divided My Dying Bride fans into the death metal Aaron camp and the clean crooning Aaron camp?
I think there's always been that divide. Some of them absolutely adore the death metal vocals. Some of them just love, because generally the ones who like the clean vocals also love the lyrics more, and they like to hear the lyrics delivered in a kind of passionate way. There's probably always been that divide, and I thought that might work against us in the early days, because I'm sure there are death metal fans saying, look, what am I Dying Bride doing? I don't like them because there's too much doom. Doom metal fans will be saying, I don't like My Dying Bride, there's too much death metal. So it was a risk to mix the two genres and then add a handful of gothic as well. We could have alienated ourselves and become absolutely nobodies and disappeared after the first album. Thankfully, it worked the opposite way around, and we sort of had quite a broad appeal. Death metal, doom metal, and goths all came along for the ride, and it's been that way ever since. We play gothic festivals in Europe. We're here doing a death metal festival. Ordinary heavy, we play classic heavy metal festivals. It seems by having that variety, we've somehow caught everybody.
The later albums in which you mixed vocals, the demonic death metal and the crooning clean, there were writers who criticized you. One camp felt betrayed, and I learned to just accept that the Turn Loose the Swans was another chapter, because as you said, although we like to hear the same kind of style over and over again, we love what we love, it's good to have something new, as long as what's new is good, and Turn Loose the Swans was actually an excellent album.
Thank you very much. Was there a question in there?
Yes. Do you sometimes get angry at the critics? Let's say someone praised you for the Turn Loose the Swans, but then the later album hated you because you returned to death metal vocals.
Yeah, I've always said this, that you can't possibly please everybody all of the time, so don't even bother trying. It's not a defeatist statement, but it means if you can please yourself, then that's the best thing to do, because then you're doing what you really want to do in music. You're not doing what you think people want you to do, or what you think might be the most appealing, the most commercially successful. You're doing what you really want to do. And we do what we really want to do, which is probably why after all these years we've remained a bit of a cult band. We've never hit the mainstream. We're happy with that. You know, we don't help ourselves sometimes when we release songs that are 27 minutes long. You know, the radio play is not going to be there at all. And
Except my radio show.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure there are. I'm sure the record labels scratch their heads sometimes and think, you know, how are we supposed to get this promoted? You know, you can't do things like that. But they've worked with us from day one, and they've allowed us complete artistic license to do anything we like, and that's absolutely brilliant. I think if we'd have moved on to a bigger label, they would have coerced us into doing more commercial, short, snappy, punchy songs, and it would have probably been the end of us.
Right. But back in the question, I was hoping that you'd target journalists, because they're beyond fans who are just anonymously writing crap on the internet. They are scolding you, and they have never made albums. They have never put themselves on. They've never taken a chance like you've taken a chance.
Yeah.
And for them to have those brave words, you've got to feel some sort of contempt.
I don't, betrayal. Because it's just no, nothing like that. No, as soon as you get into any form of entertainment or art, something where something you've created is then effectively given over to the public, you have to accept criticism, whether you like it or not. I know some people really don't, and they get all hot and flustered about it. It just comes with the territory. Some people will think you stink. Even if they loved you in the old days, they'll think you stink now. You have new fans now coming on board, and we've got 15-year-old kids coming to our gigs, and I'm thinking, shouldn't you be listening to some spunky 16-year-old kids' music? But we get all kinds of people coming, and they probably hate the old stuff because it was before they were born. You can't, as I say, you can't please everybody, so we don't bother trying. And every single record we release has negative comments on it, made by some of the big journalists and some of the smaller webzines. That just comes with the territory, and we take it on the chin like everyone in this business has to. If you don't like it, get out.
It'd be rather funny if bands got together and had either a website or a magazine that ridiculed journalists or criticized journalists.
Well, you could, but I'm sure that's a war beginning right there.
Woo! Well, getting back to
I'm alarmingly unfit.
We'll change the focal length to more mid-pace so you don't have to exercise. You can do it! One more lap!
It's not dripping sweat yet. We're okay for 5 minutes.
Getting back to the very early days of My Dying Bride, what was around Doom-wise? Did you take influence? I don't want to ask you what are your influences, but what spawned the playing slower?
Because everybody was playing so fast. Okay. It's not helpful to go against the grain sometimes, and can often be the wrong thing to do, and you end up doing nothing. But we all liked doom metal, we all liked death metal, so when we formed, we just wanted to do both, and we knew it was risky. Some killer death metal bands around at the time, and Candlemass had just released Nightfall, which was the most amazing doom album we'd all ever heard, and we just thought, it's a gamble putting both genres together. But I think it might be a risk worth taking, and we just thought, well, music should be fun. We want to do it. Let's do it. Who cares what people say? And if we stop liking it, then we'll just stop creating it, and it will have lived its natural course. But you've just got to do what you want to do, and it's always going to attract positive and negatives all the time. But it's just what we do. I need to stop now.
You might not want to answer this question, but I don't mean to start any kind of trouble.
Okay.
I know that Calvin said that in the early days, Anathema ripped off an idea for a song. Is that true?
It's part. I don't know, because I don't follow, and I never really did, apart from their early demos. In fact, even the first demo was all I listened to, because I don't. It's the same with Paradise Lost. I don't want to listen to what they do in case they're doing something really killer and we want a bit of it. And even though you might think, all right, that is brilliant, but we're not doing it, it lodges itself in the back of your brain. And when you come to create your own music, it seeps into your own music, and suddenly you're sounding a bit like them. And we had some ideas, and I'd spoken to one of the guys in Anathema this is a long time ago, it must be 22 years ago or something, about this idea I had, and something very similar turned up on one of their albums, and it's like, well, that's so. They beat us to it. We should have recorded it quicker. You know, if you're going to express things to people, you can't expect them to be copyright immediately. You know, and as I say, I haven't heard whatever the song was called, so I can't tell. And it was so long ago, I can't even remember what it was about. So even if someone played it to me and said, oh, this is that controversial song that we think Anathema may have ripped off you guys, I would probably listen to it and say, yeah, it's pretty good. I don't remember my own ideas at the time, because I've had a couple of drinks since that moment.
So it's not true that Anathema wanted you to be the singer and you said no, so they took your song?
Not that I'm aware
I'm
of.
just joking.
Thing is, I have a terrible memory. That could have happened.
I'm just joking, but we did live in a great time when there was My Dying Bride, there was Anathema, the first Paradise Lost album. We had a lot of bands doing some cool things, each with a doom pace, which resonated with me, because although I like Slayer, a lot of Slayer fans perpetuate the dumb metalhead stereotype.
Yeah. Oh.
Where their lyrics are one thing, but My Dying Bride is poetry, as are the lyrics of many doom bands. And maybe that's a good segue into the next question. Do you think it's odd that metal is sneered at? Well, that's bad grammar. So of course they sneer at us because I use bad grammar. But but people look down on metal for being stupid. And I can understand people who like Motley Crue, that's the stupid part of metal. But your lyrics and lyrics of other bands are superior to the lyrics of pop. Why do you think you should suffer this exile?
Somebody has to.
Why praise I Want You Baby and look down on you?
In all art forms, that happens all the time. Someone's got to be the underdog. Everyone can't be great. It'd be saturation and complete and utter nonsense. And I think parents particularly look down on heavy metal because they see it as the devil's music, and when you have children, I suspect you probably don't want them dabbling in the occult. Certainly not listening to those long-haired bastards. And it's just something it has that, because of the occult undertones on certainly a lot of the scene, even in the big, Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast, even in the popular stuff, and that stuff charted in England, so it must have been popular at some point. It's just still, parents don't want their kids listening to that stuff because it's tampering with Satan, and as religious or unreligious as you might be, you still don't want your kids doing that stuff, so it's always going to be frowned upon. It's always loud and brash, and people don't like loud and brash. When you stay in a hotel, you want guests who are quiet and polite. Heavy metal kids are loud and brash, the music's loud and brash, and so it's frowned upon. As good as some bands are, and as classy as some bands are, we're all tarred with the same brush, and we just take it.
In your early days, you seemed more melancholy or sorrowful. And then, would you like to talk about the other ranges that entered My Dying Bride? Did you depart somewhat? Did you lose your angst?
Well, you go through periods of good and bad, and if you're in a low part of your life at the moment when you start writing a new album, that's obviously going to be reflected in the music that's created at that time. And yeah, I can look back at some albums and think, I must have been in some big shit back then. I must have been really low. You can read it in the lyrics, and you can hear it in the way that the voice is delivering those lyrics, and you think, that is a miserable time. Whatever I was going through then, I was not a happy bunny. But saying that, even if times are good, we like creating somber moments, and so even if you're having a really good time, it's still possible to create that dark atmosphere we've always been after, always craved. It's just somewhere else to go, and we quite like going there, as dark and as miserable as it may seem. We like venturing in there every once in a while, and clearly the fans, as happy as some of them might be, like to come along for that ride. And it works both ways as well. I must have mentioned this to you a million times in the past, that we had, in the early days of letters before emails, we've had letters from kids saying, I was at the end of my tether. I was ready to quit life. And then when I heard My Dying Bride's music, I realised I'm not the only one. And we've still got these letters. And it's just like, that's absolutely brilliant. So whether you're up, down, left or right, we seem to touch certain people in a certain way, which I'm really happy with. I mean, I wasn't ever setting out to preach or get a following or anything like that. I do what I want to do, and it seems a lot of people quite like that.
I don't know if what I'm about to say is true on any level, but because I'm very expressive, but I think that other people might be locked in a cycle of thought, thinking the same thing is over and over again and being depressed. And people who resonate with either your lyrics or your music allow My Dying Bride to cry for them. So they express that darkness and then they feel release. Would you say that might be a part of what happened?
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. It works for me as well. As I say, if I've got something going on in my mind and it's really tormenting me a bit and it's actually disrupting the day-to-day tasks, then I will write about it, and it becomes obviously a part of My Dying Bride. Or it sometimes doesn't. Sometimes I write things that don't go anywhere; they just stay in a book. And equally, if the words aren't coming, then I'll create visuals and create a piece of artwork to try and get those thoughts out of my head. And it's just, I don't know where some of the thoughts come from. Sometimes you're obviously influenced by movies. I read a lot of books, other people's music. and you just write down something that is sparked in your inner soul at the back of your brain, something that you can't express during the daylight hours in the normal medium of talking. It has to come out and has to be delivered through a different sort of medium that is artistic and expressive. And that's just what I do. I mean, I do include a lot of personal thoughts in my lyrics, but because I try not to wear my heart on my sleeve too much, I add an extra flourish to make the words a bit more poetical, so that although I am able to express myself, I've hidden it. Some fans can read between the lines and they can suss out what's going on in the words. Others, they're not that bothered, they just like what they read and take it at face value. But there's all kinds of hidden stuff going on in there, and I never really tell people what hidden stuff is going on, because again, if you open your heart too much, you just become a target, an easy target, and I just prefer not to be shot down every 5 minutes.
Violin is an instrument that can express sorrow, but on the song The Bitterness and the Bereavement, it was frightening. The first time I heard that song, it froze my blood. How did that come about? That's
I have
a
no idea.
horrifying song.
Yeah, we opened a few gigs with it a couple of years ago, and I think there was a lot of shocked faces in the audience. No, actually, that was Sexuality as Bereavement. It's partner song. We don't know. Sometimes the violin normally is there to embellish the guitars and all the other instruments. Every once in a while, the violin is given the chance to just do whatever it wants to do. You know, back then it was Martin, now it's Sean. And I think I was playing with the violin one day. We were recording God knows what, and Martin wasn't there yet or something, and I had the violin. I cannot play a single instrument. But it was plugged in, and I just slowly dragged the bow across, this is my technical music knowledge, the fat string, and it just made this epic noise, and we put some reverb on it, and it was like, oh, that's fucking great. When Martin turns up, tell him to only play on the fat string, and play it wildly, and give it some, you know, add some distortion as well, why not? It's just like a mini guitar, sort of. And it worked great. And I actually wish we'd done much more distorted stuff, because I'm a big fan of Nick Cave's Grinderman project. And Warren Ellis, the violin player, plays his violin like a guitar through a distortion pedal. And it's the most raucous sound you've ever heard. It's just incredible. And I'd like to think I inspired him to do that.
I remember talking to Calvin about the riffs, and he said, no, that's an Andrew song. So is there a marked difference between their styles?
Yeah, because Andy likes massive, crushing, long riffs, and fairly simple riffs, but that are quite catchy. Riffs that you can almost hum, or when you hear them, you do that when you hear them. Calvin, and similarly with Hamish, they are much more technical. Andy will tell you he's not a guitar player, because he just likes creating great riffs. Calvin and Hamish are great guitar players, and they noodle up and down. They can play anything with their eyes closed and all the rest of it. And I think you need the technical, and I don't want to use the word simple, but you need Andy and Calvin or Hamish's riffs, because they work really well together. If they both wrote the same style, it just wouldn't work. They'd just be, well, it would just sound a bit mono. At the moment, well, I say at the moment, for years, harmonies work really well. Andy comes up with the massive, slow, crushing riffs. The other guy, whichever guitarist happens to be at the time, lays on something a bit more fiddly. Well, we've never done millions of guitar solos like most heavy metal bands do, but we do a little bit of noodling, and it just works really well. And it just wouldn't work if they both played the same thing. So yeah, I can't tell whether a track is more Andy orientated or Calvin Hamish, because of course when one of them comes up with a riff, the other guy has to learn it anyway, because they often play it at the same time when they're recording it. And I'm never sure, right, I don't know if that's right. Not all slow songs are Andy's, but the majority will be, and the more up-tempo stuff would generally, you'd think that's either Hamish or Calv, but every now and again Andy will come up with an absolute cracking 100-mile-an-hour riff, and you think, brilliant. And equally, Hamish will do this epic piece of doom, and you just think, both styles work in harmony in our band.
This question has a little bit of a lead. I wanted to ask you, but I'm not going to ask you, so I'm sorry.
And I don't have to answer.
Wait. Let me build this up. Ask him to show his buttocks.
Cheers, buddy. You're a handsome bastard.
I wanted to ask long ago why there were no heavenly soprano vocals singing operatically. Actually, I did ask you in an interview, and you are the reason why I know about Ellen.
Oh, yeah.
After you talked about them, and I've been in contact with them, and that's what I want to listen to when I'm dying.
Yeah.
It'll make me feel strong and welcome the horrors that await. So,
hurrah! That's the spirit.
So I wanted to tell you that I'm grateful that you introduced me to Ellen.
Someone else introduced me, and I was grateful to them as well. It's just, that's the way it goes.
But you have not a similar album to the style of Ellen, but to do something as a special, I don't know if it was an anniversary, you made...
Evinter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about that? What made that happen?
We always wanted to use classical instruments from the first demo, but we never had the budget, and we didn't know any friends who could play those sort of instruments except Martin. I love the sound of the cello, and it would have been superb to have cello on bloody everything, but we couldn't find any cellists. And to be honest, we never really went out and looked for any. Again, because I'm sure that first thing you say to a cellist, do you want to appear on our album? They're going to be thinking, how much money am I going to get from this? And we had no money. So we used keyboards to replicate orchestras in whatever way we could. It was all right at the time. Musical samples were quite good at the time. They're even better now. But we always wanted some sort of orchestral symphony going on in the background. So we made it with keyboards and the violin, but it's always been there. And even to this day, we've never got the budget to do it. We see smaller bands doing it live on stage with half an orchestra, and I just think to myself, how do you do that? Because it's not just that moment in time. They've had to rehearse with this orchestra as well. It's not just tonight we're doing it. It's weeks of practice, and all these people have got to be paid. And I just think, where do they get the money from? But we've always wanted it because I've listened to opera for many years, and I thought about doing something, and I spoke to Andrew about it, and he said, just go away and work on it and see what happens. And so I literally did Evinter almost completely by myself, regarding My Dying Bride, and with Johnny Maudlin from Balsa Goth, who is a superb musician, absolutely superb. Because I can't play anything, I needed someone to help out and to try and, work with me on this. And he knew a few musicians who could help out as well. And I knew Lucy Roche, the French opera singer. She was a big fan of My Dying Bride. She got in touch with us a few years earlier saying, if you need any operatic soprano, give us a shout. And when we needed her, she was off doing some tour of Wagner somewhere in the world, because she's really popular. When she was free, we were busy doing something. We just missed each other all the time. And then when the Evinter project came together, because there was no timeline, the record label didn't even know it was happening. I could wait for everybody to be ready. And then when all the parts started to come together, I arranged with Johnny to start the recording process. And one of the things we wanted to do is not just cover our early stuff in a classical style.
Unplugged.
It's so easily done. Everyone can do that. It's not lame, but it's just, whatever. So what myself and Andrew did is we listened to a whole back catalogue of My Dying Bride. And with pen and paper, we listened to what we considered the very best parts of each song. So we wrote the song title down, and we wrote the timeline where we thought the best riff started and ended, and how long it lasted for, and we had pages of all these ideas. So when I took them to Johnny, I said, right, this riff is played on a violin, we'd like it played on a cello. This riff is played on a guitar, we'd like it played on a violin. And so he had to then do the working out, right, he's got the notes, and then we just mixed it all up into a massive concoction. And so in one track on a Vinter, you might hear 6 or 7 previous My Dying Bride parts, but played on different instruments from wildly differing parts of our history. And then I added new lyrics, and we added some new music to it as well, and we ended up with so much music, it ended up being a 3 CD affair with lots of vocals, lots of operatics, keys, strings. We even did some samples, there's some electronic stuff going on in there as well. It's a bit Vangelis in places, which I like and Johnny likes, and it was just a real. It was going to be a side project. Then when I delivered it to the rest of the band, they said, "Oh, it's got to be My Dying Bride. It can't be. You can't give it another name and release it under some other brand. This is My Dying Bride." So it came out, and we failed to warn people of its content, and immediately on the internet we got lots of feedback saying, what's happened to My Dying Bride? What's this new direction they're taking? And it was only when we realised we should have perhaps told people beforehand. This isn't what we're doing. This is a one-off. It's something we've wanted to do for many, many years. We've now done it, but we are continually writing a new album, heavy metal style. This was just a spike, if you like. And once people realised it wasn't a complete change of direction, this isn't how we're doing it forever, they warmed to it much more, and they really got into it. And now I absolutely love it. I have it on 2 or 3 times a week. And you still hear little things you didn't hear before, because again, there's so much going on there. And it's rich. It's a rich piece of music, and it's great to listen to. And so there.
I was going to say that the people who I know have heard it, listened to it as a sacrament, but they and I knew what it would be before. We didn't know what it would actually sound like until we actually heard it, but we knew that it wasn't a typical My Dying Bride. Although I think across your discography, there's no such thing as a typical My Dying Bride.
No, well, that's nice to hear. Yeah, I'm sure some people think, oh, it's My Dying Bride, they've been around 20 years, they're doing the same stuff all. But we know that we try and inject new and interesting and original ideas into every single recording. It doesn't always come out as new and original as we liked, because we always prefer to keep sight of our roots. We don't want to run away too far from our foundation. But yeah, we like what we do, and we hope that we vary enough with each release to make it still interesting.
All right, let me change angles. Maybe My Dying Bride would have had more money if you had better marketing, if you had trinkets, maybe plush dolls. If you had cello in the band, you could have had a dessert item called Cello Gelatin. All right, so to begin this new focal length, in the past, I have asked silly questions.
Really?
Well, actually, I've asked silly questions today, even though I told you I wouldn't. In a role reversal, would you like to ask something silly of me?
Are you coming swimming in this pool behind me after this interview?
Is there an undress code?
No, I don't think so. We once did an interview with Robert Muller of various publications, and we were on holiday in Italy. The whole band were taking a holiday in Italy, and he flew down from Bavaria to join us. And we said we're going swimming and we'd like to do the interview maybe on a beach or something. And he's like, yeah, all right. And we expected him to be like, no, that's ridiculous. And he came with us, and we've got the photographs of him. He had some particularly brief briefs on that day, but was happy to take his clothes off and join us in the sea, and was conducting the interview while swimming in the Mediterranean. So jump in. We're going to jump in and have a swim around in a minute. And if my penis ends up, just flapping around of its own accord, so be it.
It's been known to wander, right?
It has been known to wander. It's such a difficult thing to tame.
So if it were a snake, would it be a biter or a constrictor?
Let's just go with biting, shall we?
All right.
Oh, that's 7 calories.
So I sense a new album cover with your, how do you say it in England? Your Johnson?
Thomas,
Your
equipment, member, tool.
With fangs.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. It's probably already been done, I'm sure. Nothing is original anymore.
William Blake said there's nothing new under the sun.
There you go.
I did notice you have a tendency not to warn people of any changes. It's been with your clean vocals to the band. It was without an official announcement about the classical album.
Yeah.
Where was I going with this? You also did it lyrically. I never expected the word heroin to come out of your mouth in My Dying Bride song. Would you like to talk about that era?
Yeah, there was a brief moment when we toyed with the thought of being a bit more commercial. And we were still under the Music for Nations label a long time ago. And we thought, let's write a few more catchy songs. Let's not do 9-minute Latin doom epics. For one album, let's just experiment and have a little bit of fun, and don't be so pretentious, and just write some stuff that's off the cuff, easy to get into. It might get us some record play around the world and might, expand the profile a little bit. And so we did 34.788%, which is obviously not. It's a great. We fell at the first hurdle there with the shittest album title ever. But yeah, we wrote some slightly more, what we thought were slightly more commercial songs, but they're still not commercial. When you hear them, they're still not that commercial. And we felt like doing something with Michelle. I can't remember her surname, unfortunately, but we knew she had a great voice. And instead of getting a woman in to do vocals on a heavy metal album, which has been done a million times before by tons of other bands in that same style that a lot of gothic women seem to deliver all the time, we wanted to do something a bit more punchy and a bit really out of character for My Dying Bride. And so we did Heroin Chic, and it was all electronic nonsense. And yeah, I had a foul mouth that day. But we censored our own bad language. Some people still think the record label censored it, but our record label don't censor anything. It's Peaceful Records, for Christ's sake. We censored it ourselves just because it was a laugh, so that later on we could re-release another version that isn't censored. That's a bit of commerciality there. And so I sung something that was a bit urban and a bit edgy and a bit down with the kids and a bit gritty, and I think that song particularly stands out the most from that album, certainly being the most controversial, and the one that everyone seems to want to talk about. Hence this conversation right now. But if we were to have left that song off that album, given it a different cover and a different title, it would have still been a great My Dying Bride album with some slightly more commercial songs on it. Because a commercial song for My Dying Bride is still a really awkward bastard for general airplay.
I just didn't understand heroin. Alan from Primordial used heroin in lyrics. I don't know if he used heroin when he recorded. When he was writing, he used heroin as a subject for a couple of songs, and I thought that was really odd. And he told me that in Europe it's a big problem. I wonder why heroin, the word or the subject, came to your mind.
It was the whole. I can't remember who coined the phrase heroin chic, which is a fashionista thing. And it basically it was encouraging young girls to be as skinny as you possibly can be, wear clothing that clearly doesn't fit you, stand in the most awkward and uncomfortable looking positions for photo shoots, with big black makeup under the eyes. It was this death look. And it was popular in all the big, Vogue. Everyone was doing this heroin chic. We want pictures of skinny girls looking like they're dying and on drugs. And I was sat at home thinking, who came up with that bullshit? That's not a look. Well, that's not a look you want to promote. It's complete awfulness. And I think it may have been whoever was the president of the US at the time also mentioned the phrase, this heroin chic is nonsense. We need to do something about it. Girls read these magazines and they generally would like to look a little bit like some of the people they see. And if they get the idea that, well, they might get the idea that you don't need makeup anymore. If you just do drugs, you'll look like these girls. And you just think, oh, fuck me, what is the world coming to? What is the world coming to? And it wasn't about the drug heroin as such. It was about a destructive look that could change people's lives. And that was sort of my angle, rather than the actual snorting or smoking of the white powder itself.
I'm so smart that I thought the name of the song was Heroin Chic.
Well, loads of people did. Chic, darling, chic.
On another level, it seems that a social issue might have entered, or was it experience? The Dreadful Hours. Is it about child abuse?
Yes, and it's not even hidden. I think it's quite
Watch your
clear
father's
that
hand.
there's a narrative which is, I think it's fairly obvious what's going on in that song. And it was, I'm still surprised that some people missed it, given that it's not really hidden and it's not particularly cryptic. And yet when we did the 70,000 tons of metal cruise around the Caribbean, which was great, a young woman came up to me and she said, "Oh, my friend has just explained to me what the lyrics for the Dreadful Hours are like," and she was like, "Oh man, that totally touches, you know," that was a problem in her day. And of course when we're performing the song, she's at the front with tears roaring down her cheeks. And I was surprised that she'd only just figured it out, because, as I say, it's not that cryptic. Some of the things I write, you don't understand what it's about. You might need to reread them several times. Other things, it's just written down for you to understand. And I thought Dreadful Hours was fairly obvious, but some people still missed it a bit. But yeah, it's just a touch on a sort of rather nasty thing that happens from time to time. But then I do sing about nasty things. But I try and do it in a not polite way, but a more poetical way, because, you know, Cannibal Corpse sing about nasty things as well, but you can't really compare My Dying Bride to Cannibal Corpse.
I think yours is more on a level of social awareness rather than shock.
Yeah.
Although I have to admit that I heard that song around the same time that I saw a movie, The Girl Next Door. It was Jack Ketchum's Girl Next Door.
Right.
If you haven't seen it, it was the first time I felt tension watching a movie in a long time. And part of that was kids had no power in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Adults were always right. Whatever kids said was ignored if an adult contradicted it. So The Dreadful Hours, as you say, there's no hidden...
No, it's...
my question was more what made you do that?
I honestly can't believe... My childhood with my father is absolutely great. It still is, actually.
So he didn't spank you for that song?
No, I've been spanked by many other people. Wonderfully, in fact. I paid for it on some occasions. But no, there must have been something at that point, maybe a book I'd read or a movie I'd seen, where I'd found a great deal of discomfort and thought that will translate quite well into music if you treat it right. But no, that's certainly not a reflection on my personal life at all. I was lucky enough to have a pretty good childhood, actually. So it unfortunately will have touched on some people, but not me.
All right, let me just change the focal length to more of a close-up since we're winding down.
Okie
I
dokie.
want to give you some flattering shots.
Oh, let's get another top up. You'll be wrinkled up by now, won't you, Robert? You'll be wrinkled up by now.
I'm as wrinkly as an old man's pecker.
I can't wait for that bird to come down back now. She knows we're down here.
She's in bed with Hamish.
She is going to be so full of cum. Which I think you'll find is a line that was scrubbed out of...
You have to end that interview with, I think you'll find.
It was from Romeo and Juliet. One of the lines that got scrubbed by his editor.
I think you'll find that's from the Quran.
Oh, is it the Quran? Oh, that's it. Oh.
It's true from Alan.
Please, two in it, mate.
It's true from Boko Alan Kaiser.
Good. She's got a headband. Let's keep the Muslim things down a bit, shall we? We don't want to get, into too much trouble.
So, just reminding you that you can say don't use this if you can invoke that power. I don't know where this question comes from, but
that's a great start.
But do any portions of your profits go to fund Al Qaeda?
All of them. No, none, funnily enough.
Well, I wonder if there is going to be a song about terrorism or Muslims on a future My Dying Bride album because of your social awareness.
Well, there are a lot of bands already doing that sort of stuff. And the reason, actually, that's a good point, because one of the reasons I steered clear of politics was because, again, when we first formed, loads of bands were doing the whole, the world is shit, blah, blah, blah. And all they were doing was effectively taking what was on the news the night before and writing a song about it. And I thought, anyone can do that. And I've just seen it on the news. Why do I want to hear about it on a record? For me, music needed to be a form of escapism. I wanted to create something which would take people away from this shitty life, take them somewhere else, equally shitty, but on a different level, and just give them a break from the day-to-day, which is why I never got too political, because you're listening to the news if you're listening to a political song, and it's just not my thing. I see why other people do it, but it doesn't interest me.
I'm glad you said that, because metal is more of escapism.
I think so.
And hardcore or punk is more hi, we never finished school, but we have a lot to say about
Yeah. You're right. I do like the fantasy element of heavy metal. I mean, and you can tell that in the album covers. Heavy metal album covers are great. Their artwork, that we've all had them on our walls at some point. And you look at stuff like Number of the Beast is probably, it's an absolute classic. We all had the T-shirt. It's a great piece of artwork. There's not a lot of social commentary on there, and who cares? It's escapism. That's what we want, something to get us away from the shitty rat race. Man, I'm up to 3 calories.
Oh, your groupies have arrived. Would you like an exercise lesson with Aaron?
Sure. I need one, don't I?
But you have to sit on his lap for this.
Okay.
Are you able to do it? Could you drive with someone on your lap?
Of course I can.
Try it.
Okay.
See how it works out.
This is interesting.
I've never done this.
No, I've never
before.
done this before.
Okay.
Right, okay. I'm not sure. Where are you going to put your feet?
Yeah, where am I going to put my feet?
Where are we going with this, everybody?
All right, Aaron, could you please instruct
Make me
me on
look
the
like an
proper
ass?
way to exercise?
The proper way to exercise, I think you'll find, is to bend over a lot, wear the tightest and skimpiest clothing,
Okay.
and I think that's about it.
Aaron, should you be thrusting to get an aerobic exercise at this point?
I can. Let me just lift my. I don't know where the other pedal is. Let's just. There we go. How's that?
Nice.
Hell, I'm fitter than I thought. I'm in so much trouble right now. Oh, look at this. We're working it, girlfriend. And there's a mirror there as well. Look at that. Yes. Yes.
Sweet.
Everybody go to the gym. It's this good.
How many calories are we burning?
Burning a lot. You have to get off now, darling.
Thank you for that, by the way.
My trousers are becoming more uncomfortable.
Sorry, but I'm very, very sorry.
It's all right.
Would you like to stand beside Aaron?
And do like a before and after. This is when you go to the gym, and that's if you don't go to the gym.
Oh, I'm not sitting on his lap. I've been on his lap many times.
Warm in here. You might be right in the front of the camera there.
Sorry.
Don't tread on that lens. Daniel, when I first saw you, I threw my guards up because you're a cunt. Continue.
Cheers.
Since you're wearing a hoodie, one might think in America that you're trying to hide from the security camera. It's perfect for this situation here. Could you pretend that you do not know Aaron, and you're a typical American journalist, and you would like to ask him some questions?
Fuck off!
Hey there. Do I ever consider not being here?
I wish I was not here. Now that you're here, I wish I was elsewhere.
Do you like to be called Aaron or ass?
Depends
Ass.
who's...
Kind of sounds like ass.
We all get called ass from time to time. I don't mind it. I get called it many, many times by many, many different people. And I'm just looking forward to getting into the swimming pool now that my workout's virtually finished.
We're almost done. Aaron, could you pretend that you're not in My Dying Bride, and that you're an American and you want to ask him a question?
So I'm an American, but he is in My Dying Bride.
Yes, but we don't know that. Could you take your hood off for a second? All
Hey,
right, and
Dan from My Dying Bride. Hey, man, how are you? Fancy seeing you here, dude. You guys suck.
Cheers, man.
now, ask him a question, American.
How come you guys never come and tour here, man? What's with that?
Because we don't like you very much.
Oh, man, that sucks. You guys are fucking losers.
We do try.
All right, well, I guess Aaron wants to get into the pool. Who can blame him? Aaron, is there anything that you'd like to say before we leave? You know that I'm not very smart. I pretend to be smart.
We all know that, Bill.
So, tell me what to ask you. That's a good thing.
Goodness me. Ask me, because I love cooking, ask me a culinary question.
All right. When you're asked how do you drink your tea, I would say coffee, but England is a tea area. When you're asked how do you take it, do you respond orally because you're proper? Or how does one cook tea? In America, we boil water, we insert a tea bag anally. How do you do it in England?
Exactly the same way, I think you'll find, Bill.
So why do
Exactly
you
the
say
same way.
Cook tea, it's brew tea, isn't it?
You do brew tea, and if you're doing it for more than one person, you will use a teapot. And you would warm the teapot first, so you boil the kettle twice. Teapot, boiling water, lid on, a knitted cosy that your nana's made on top of that as well. Refill kettle, put kettle on again. Cup, and a cup, not a china, not like you see typically in Britain, not a china thing on a small saucer, a big fucking mug, as we call them. A spoonful of sugar, not milk yet. Not milk yet. Whoa there, with your milk. Keep that in your pants. Then you ease the tea out of the spout into your cup, stir it so the sugar dissolves, add milk to taste, drink. Write that down, in case I forget.
Are you familiar with the band Primordial?
Yes.
What do you think of them? If you think something negative, don't say anything.
No, they're pretty good. They did the Caribbean thing as well, and they put on a blinding performance. Absolutely brilliant.
Did you know that their lyrics have to do with, some of their lyrics have to do with Irish folklore, but he's actually English?
Well, I'm half Irish,
Oh,
so
you are, so-
I am allowed, should I choose to, bring a bit more Celtic influence into my work, which actually we touched upon with the Barchester Whitby, and we did a cover of Scarborough Fair. And I might touch upon that a little bit more in the future, to be honest. I'm 50% Irish. I've got a great family who live over there. I don't visit them as often as I should. And I think next time I do go, I might take the old pen and paper and just try and see what happens.
I've been told that American bands touring do not get the same kind of cuisine one would get in a European tour. And people from Ireland and England are susceptible to scurvy. So in your rider, do you ask for oranges and limes?
We ask for socks. Not for eating, obviously, for the wearing of the said stinky feet. We used to ask for postcards already stamped so that we can get to the dressing room, write some shit, and then someone sends them home for us. We don't do the whole M&M's bullshit. We have beer, wine, some spirits, some sandwiches, crisps, or I think you call them chips, and a little bit of fruit. Just a bit, nothing special. We're not that crazy. We should ask for crazy things just to see if people are actually reading the contract, but they probably won't supply it.
If you woke up drunk in an airplane with a parachute attached and then dropped off somewhere in America, what would be the food you miss the most?
Curry.
Curry.
Curry is massive. The most popular takeout food in the UK. Fish and chips got nailed out years ago. Indian cuisine, I use the word cuisine quite wrongly. Indian food is just delicious. And where we're from, in the north of England, particularly close to Bradford, Bradford's only a small city, and yet there's over 200 curry houses, as we call them. And that is a lot for a small city. And I know they have curry in the US, but you sort of, I've had it once before, and it was overpriced, it wasn't very nice, and you can sort of see why Indian food is not frowned upon in the US, but it's not, it's just not liked as much as we like it. So I would miss my Indian cuisine.
Especially the biryani.
Is curry short for Korean?
No, curry is its own word. Bill's so clever.
Nice
I
draw.
wanted to ask you if you're comfortable eating food that is usually prepared by hand by people who don't have good hygiene.
I love it. I have terrible hygiene and cook for my entire family. I pick my
I
nose.
believe it's curry.
I go to the toilet and don't wash my hands.
What else do you pick?
Everything. I play with my cock while
Well, that's
baking.
You
Awesome.
stimulate your immune system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think most people, especially in curry houses, probably do the same.
But let's
That
end on a
might be
serious
healthy.
note. F sharp, let us do it.
Ta-da!
No, you asked me to ask you a culinary question. Is that because you want to say something food-wise? Are you fond of a special recipe?
My beef stroganoff is to die for. So, but I think I might put it up online actually. It's just, that's food. I know some people say this. Some food, if prepared just right, is better than sex. My beef stroganoff is not that, but it's good.
All right,
Oh,
let me
don't
do
tease.
one last test before we leave. Mr.
Rob.
Good Butt Cheeks, can you enter?
Come on, Rab.
Don't make it
Through the door.
You're going to be on telly, lad.
And you stay there, Aaron. And could you stand next to him?
Why?
We'll get Sean in on this as
I
well.
would like Aaron.
Look at the difference in bodies between. You look like you've shit him.
I would like Aaron to close his eyes, and I will count to 3, and one of you kiss him on the cheek, and he'll try to guess who it was.
I've got a fucking beard.
don't give it away. 1,
Only on the cheek.
2, 3. Who
Mm.
was it?
It could have been Sean. It was quite feminine. I'm going with Sean.
That's like quite a compliment, Sean.
Hello.
Oh, Europeans.
I'm only interested in kissing him if I can do it on his dick.
All right, well, thank you, and go ahead this room.
Sean is
And I
well
think you'll-
known
and I
as.
think you'll find that's 12th night.
I think you'll find that it's 12th Night from William Shakespeare.
So Sean's as good of a kisser as me?
Yeah.